A restaurant owner publicly humiliates and kicks out a homeless man at the city's most prestigious restaurant. Little does he know, the man he's just humiliated is the same billionaire who built the foundation of his success. Welcome to an incredible and teachable story where every tale is packed with life-changing lessons and unforgettable twists. Prepare to be inspired, challenged, and amazed by stories that will make you think twice. If you enjoy captivating narratives with a meaningful message, you're in the perfect place. Show some love, like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss out on the next story that'll leave you thinking. Let's get started. The night air is cool, carrying with it the faint scent of freshly baked bread and sizzling delicacies from the upscale restaurant that sits at the corner of the bustling city street. In the heart of the city, where the glow of streetlights dances off the sleek glass facades of luxury buildings, a world of wealth and sophistication thrives within. The lavish interior of La Lumière radiates elegance. Crystal chandeliers sparkle overhead, their light casting a warm glow on the pristine white tablecloths and golden silverware. Every corner hums with hushed conversations as patrons, draped in designer attire, indulge in gourmet meals paired with the finest wines. The sounds of soft classical music fill the space, the delicate notes from a grand piano providing a perfect soundtrack to the evening's opulence. Waiters glide across the room, their movements smooth and practiced, ensuring that every glass is filled, every course arrives on time, and every guest is treated like royalty. But outside, just beyond the restaurant's gleaming windows, stands a different world, a world far removed from the luxury and glamour inside. Niven watches the scene from across the street. His clothes are torn, stained, and weathered by the harshness of life on the streets. His hair, unkempt and wild, falls in untamed strands over his brow. His face is rough, an unfamiliar blend of age and hardship etched into his features. Yet there's something about him, a quiet strength, an air of hidden charisma that radiates beneath the surface. Though his appearance screams struggle, there's a fire in his eyes, a glint that suggests he's not the man the world assumes him to be. He stands, unmoving, watching as laughter and clinking glasses fill the air inside. His stomach rumbles. The warmth of the restaurant calls to him. For a moment, Niven hesitates. The contrast between his reality and the gilded world before him is stark, but hunger pushes him forward. His hand tightens around the edge of his worn jacket as he gathers the last vestiges of his courage. The restaurant is in reach, a brief moment of respite, just a simple meal. That's all he asks for. With a deep breath, Niven pushes the door open. The sound of the bell above the door is barely audible over the low murmur of conversation inside. A hush falls, if only for a second, as the restaurant patrons glance up at him, his entrance unexpected, out of place. The warmth of the room feels foreign against his cold skin, and the faint scent of roasting meats and baking desserts fills his senses, momentarily distracting him from his purpose. But it's not the food he needs now. It's the acceptance, the chance to feel human again, to be treated like someone worthy of a meal, even if just for one night. His footsteps echo through the marble floor, drawing eyes. The whispers begin, soft and judgmental. Who is he? Why is he here? Their eyes move over him, but not with curiosity. They look through him as if his very presence is an inconvenience. As he makes his way deeper into the restaurant, one figure stands in his path. Leandro, the restaurant owner, a man of sharp suits and sharper words, glances at Niven with disdain. His cold, calculating eyes are the first to meet Niven's gaze. There's no welcome in his eyes, only judgment. Leandro's lips curl into a smirk, a subtle mockery of the dishevelled man standing before him. "This is not a place for someone like you," Leandro says, his voice dripping with condescension. "You'd better turn around and leave before you make a scene." Niven, undeterred, stands his ground. He can feel the weight of every eye in the room on him, every judgmental gaze pressing in. But this is not the first time he's been looked down upon. Not by a long shot. "I'm just here for a meal," he mutters, his voice steady, though there's a flicker of desperation in his tone. Leandro's smirk widens. "No, you're here to make a mockery of everything this restaurant stands for. You think you're entitled to a seat at my table? You don't belong here." He gestures toward the door, the dismissal final. "Leave. Now." The harshness of the words cuts through the air. Niven's pulse quickens, his heart pounding in his chest. The door that had promised warmth now feels like a barrier, and the rejection stings harder than any cold wind he's ever faced. But in that moment, something within him shifts, something deeper than the hunger, deeper than the sting of humiliation. Before Niven can respond, before the anger can settle into his throat, he mutters a phrase, one that feels like a promise to the world around him. "I'll be back." It's cryptic, ominous in its certainty. His words hang in the air as Leandro's expression hardens, though there's a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, something that hints at Niven's deeper truth. The murmurs in the restaurant swell. Niven steps back, not out of fear, but with a quiet resolve. His exit is as unnoticed as his entrance, but there's something unmistakable about it. This isn't the end of his story. Far from it. As Niven exits, the faces of the patrons turn, their whispers turning into louder conversations. Their curiosity is piqued. What was that about? Who was the dishevelled man? And more importantly, why did he look like he had a secret, one that could shatter everything they knew? This story is only just beginning. Don't forget to hit that like button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Before the weathered, dishevelled figure that now stands at the threshold of La Lumière, Niven was a man who commanded the room, his presence powerful yet understated. In his prime, he was a suave billionaire, a titan of industry whose name was known in boardrooms, across stock markets and in the halls of power. He wore his success effortlessly. The sharp suits, the polished shoes and the gleaming watch on his wrist were symbols of his triumph. Yet, despite the outward image of wealth and arrogance, those who truly knew Niven understood something more. Beneath his polished exterior lay a man of rare integrity, someone who gave not only to charity, but to people in need, without expecting anything in return. He had a knack for seeing potential in others, something that set him apart in an industry where people were often seen as mere stepping stones for personal gain. His office was a reflection of this. It wasn't just the cutting-edge technology or the sleek modern furniture that made it stand out. It was the warmth that permeated every corner. A warmth that came from Niven's leadership style. Employees came to him not just for guidance, but for support. He'd take time to listen to their stories, to understand their struggles. For Niven, success wasn't just measured by his fortune, it was measured by the impact he made on the lives of those around him. One of those lives was Crispin, a young street artist who had stumbled into Niven's world by pure chance. It was a rainy afternoon when Niven first saw Crispin, drenched and struggling to carry a roll of canvas along the sidewalk. Niven, passing by in his luxury car, had spotted the artist in the middle of painting a mural on a forgotten building wall. His eyes locked with Crispin's, and for a brief moment Niven saw something familiar, a raw, unpolished talent, much like the hunger he'd had when he first started his own business. Despite the rain, Niven stopped his car and called out to Crispin. He offered him a warm coat and invited him to lunch at a nearby cafe. Over sandwiches, they talked about art, ambition, and the struggles that came with wanting to make a difference. Crispin admired Niven from that moment, not because he was a billionaire, but because he was a man who saw potential in him. Crispin, with his paint-stained hands and eyes filled with dreams of recognition, became one of the many people Niven took under his wing. Over time, Niven supported Crispin's art, not through mere financial donations, but by connecting him with influential figures in the art world, pushing him toward recognition in ways he'd never dreamed of. Then there was Valencia, Niven's business partner, elegant, charming, and with an ambition that burned just as brightly as Niven's. She was a woman who had once shared his vision of building something that would last. But ambition, in her case, quickly turned to something darker. Niven trusted her, believed in her abilities, and even admired her strength and cunning. Their partnership was one of mutual respect, at least on Niven's side. They built a global empire together, combining his business acumen with her marketing genius. Together they took risks that paid off spectacularly, elevating their company to new heights. But over time, something changed. As the company's profits soared, so too did Valencia's greed. She became more distant, more calculating, and eventually, Niven began to sense a shift in their dynamic. It wasn't just her increasing desire for control, it was the subtle manipulation, the whispering in corners with other influential figures, and the growing desire to distance herself from Nevin's more altruistic approach to business. Where he believed in giving people second chances, Valencia believed in cutting ties with anyone who no longer served her ambition. Where he saw opportunity in people, she saw obstacles to her rise. One day, Nevin returned to the office after a meeting, only to find an unexpected piece of news. Valencia had secretly sold a portion of their company to a rival investor, completely cutting him out of the deal. She'd engineered the sale under the guise of a strategic business move, one that would help the company grow. But Nevin knew the truth. It wasn't a business move, it was a betrayal. The money wasn't to help the company. It was to fund an entirely new venture, a venture that didn't include him. When Nevin confronted Valencia, her calm response was chilling. She explained that the company had outgrown its original mission and that, in her eyes, Nevin had become too idealistic, too focused on people rather than profit. "We all have to make sacrifices for success, Nevin," she had said coldly, her eyes gleaming with a mix of ambition and something darker, something that Nevin couldn't quite place. That was the moment everything changed. Nevin realised that the very thing that had made their partnership so successful, the trust, the respect, had been shattered. Valencia had used his belief in her as a tool for her own ascent, and when it suited her, she discarded him. She turned on him, and Nevin, blindsided by the betrayal, found himself alone at the top. Days turned into weeks, and the fallout was catastrophic. Valencia worked with the new investors to push Nevin out, using her charm and calculated moves to dismantle his influence piece by piece. The board members, some of whom Nevin had known for years, sided with her. The media, quick to pounce on the scandal, painted Nevin as the villain, portraying him as a once great man who had become too distracted by his own principles to see the ruthless world around him. The public, fickle and quick to turn on those who fall from grace, abandoned him. Soon, Nevin's empire crumbled. His wealth vanished, stolen in the blink of an eye by the woman he had trusted most. The betrayal was not only financial, it was personal. It shook him to his core, leaving him with nothing, and that nothing turned into the streets, the cold nights, the hunger. But as Nevin would come to learn, betrayal doesn't just strip away wealth, it strips away your humanity, your sense of self. And the hardest part was knowing that Valencia, the person he had once believed in and helped rise to prominence, had stolen everything from him without a second thought. But even in the depths of despair, Nevin never lost sight of who he truly was. His kindness, his ability to see potential in others, still remained. It wasn't gone, but it would take more than a fall from grace to break him completely. Somewhere out there, he still had allies, people like Crispin, who had always believed in second chances, who never saw him as anything less than the man who once believed in him. And maybe, just maybe, he could turn the tables. As the mystery of Valencia's betrayal deepens, the shadows of Nevin's past begin to surface. The question remains, how far will Nevin go to reclaim everything that was taken from him? But back to the present day, the atmosphere in the restaurant shifts as Nevin stands at the centre of it all, a forgotten figure in a sea of tailored suits and high-priced wines. The warmth that once greeted him now feels alien, unwelcome, like a man who no longer belongs in a world he helped create. Leandro's voice breaks the fragile silence, sharp and unforgiving. "You need to leave. Now." There's a coldness in the air as the restaurant owner steps forward, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floor with a certain finality. His hands, thin and trembling with barely contained anger, move to grasp Nevin by the arm. Nevin flinches, not from fear, but from the weight of something far deeper, the recognition that his fall from grace is complete and the world he once ruled has already moved on without him. "Get your hands off me," Nevin mutters quietly, but the force of Leandro's grip tightens, dragging him toward the door. His words are more than just a protest. They carry something else, something cryptic. "I'll be back, you'll see." It's a strange statement, barely audible to those within earshot, but it carries with it the unmistakable weight of resolve. There's an eerie sense of finality in Nevin's voice, as if this moment is a mere spark to the greater fire that's about to ignite. It's a declaration that something far bigger is in motion, a promise he might not even fully understand himself. Leandro pushes Niven roughly out the door, the restaurant's gold-framed entrance swinging open with a bang that echoes through the room. The door slams behind him, and for a moment there's a stunned silence in the dining room. No one speaks, but eyes dart to one another, unsure of how to react. Some return to their meals as though Niven's departure had been nothing more than a fleeting nuisance, while others whisper amongst themselves, sharing quick glances as they catch glimpses of the homeless man fading into the night. But then from one of the tables near the window a voice rises, soft at first, then more deliberate. It's Celeste, a wealthy woman in her mid-30s, sharply dressed in a velvet gown that sparkles under the chandelier light. Her eyes, usually attentive to the latest trends in fashion, are now locked on the door where Niven had just been thrown out. Something about his eyes lingered with her, something haunting and familiar. She had noticed him the moment he walked through the door, standing out in the crowd, not because of the ragged clothes or the weathered face, but because of the intensity in his gaze. There was a depth there, a memory that seemed too vivid for a man living on the streets. She had seen that look before, on the faces of the city's greats, the ones who had built empires only to watch them crumble. But Niven's was different. His eyes held a sense of quiet power, as if he were not simply a victim of fate, but a man who had been forced to become something else entirely. Celeste leans closer to the man seated across from her, her voice low, almost to herself. That man, she pauses, narrowing her eyes as she recalls the name, Niven, the billionaire whose empire once rivaled the city's finest. He had vanished from the spotlight years ago, his name fading from headlines and conversations as swiftly as it had arrived. I swear I know him, Celeste says again, this time more confidently, her hand resting on the edge of her wine glass as she stands, excusing herself from the table. Her movement is calm, purposeful as she walks toward the door, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Her curiosity, something that has always driven her to dig deeper than most, is piqued. She doesn't know why, but something about Niven's presence ignites a spark in her, a feeling that cannot be ignored. As Celeste exits the restaurant and approaches Niven, who is now standing outside, staring up at the glittering city skyline, she hesitates for just a moment. There is something undeniably compelling about this man, a sense of mystery that pulls at her. She's used to power, used to wealth, but Niven, there is something raw and untapped about him, something beneath the surface that she needs to understand. She calls out to him softly, Niven? The name comes easily, as though she's known him for years, even though their paths had never crossed until now. Niven turns at the sound of his name, his gaze locking with hers for the briefest of moments. There's recognition in his eyes, only a flicker, but enough for Celeste to feel that she isn't imagining things. He doesn't respond at first, his expression unreadable, as though the weight of the world had settled onto his shoulders. You're Celeste, aren't you? His voice is low, raspy, but there's a note of surprise that lingers in his words. I never thought I'd see you again. Celeste steps closer, her curiosity growing stronger. How do you know me? She asks, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. She hasn't seen him in years, but she remembers his name, the articles, the interviews, the reports about his rise to fame and his sudden disappearance from the public eye. Niven looks away briefly, his eyes narrowing as though he's searching for something far beyond her. Then, with a slight shrug, he mutters, I knew a lot of people back in the day, but it's different now. Things change. Celeste's mind races, piecing together the fragments of his past she had read about. The billionaire mogul who vanished after a series of shocking scandals and betrayals. But there's more to this man than just headlines. Celeste can feel it. Is Celeste the key to unravelling the truth behind Niven's fall? Stick around to find out, and remember to subscribe for more twists in this story that is far from over. The city streets are alive with the hum of nightlife as Niven walks alongside Celeste, the sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. But within him, there's a storm brewing. He can feel the weight of his past pressing against him like a heavy cloak, threatening to choke him. The thoughts swirl through his mind, images of boardrooms filled with smoke and whispers of betrayal, the burning of contracts in a fireplace as Valencia's cold eyes watched him unravel. The city, now full of wealth and grandeur, had once been his playground, and yet he's standing on the edge of it, cast out like a forgotten relic. Niven says his goodbyes to Celeste, who, for reasons she can't fully understand, promises to check in on him soon. But Celeste's departure is a fleeting moment in the grand narrative of Niven's life. There's something else he must do, something unfinished. He turns his back on the city's vibrant nightlife and heads toward a small, tucked-away neighborhood that once held the remnants of his former life. It's here, in the shadows of the tall skyscrapers, that Niven finds Crispin. The young street artist, now a man in his mid-30s, is no longer the idealistic dreamer he once was. He's a successful artist, his works now sold in galleries, his name etched into the vibrant corners of the city's artistic elite. Yet, as Niven walks through the door of Crispin's loft, more like a studio now than the humble apartment it once was, the warmth of their old friendship is undeniable. Crispin, spotting Niven in the doorway, immediately rises from his canvas, his eyes widening in recognition. Niven. The name escapes Crispin's lips as if the years between them have evaporated in the blink of an eye. His smile is cautious but genuine. He had never believed in the stories that Niven had fallen from grace, and despite everything, he had kept the hope that his old friend would return to the surface. "You look different," Crispin adds, his voice filled with both wonder and concern. Niven steps into the room, running a hand through his now greying hair. His appearance is rough, clothes ragged, skin weathered and eyes tired, but beneath it all there's a flicker of the man Crispin once knew. The man who had supported his art, believed in his potential, even when the world seemed to turn its back. "I'm not the man I used to be," Niven responds quietly, his voice tinged with a deep sorrow, "but I'm still here." Crispin studies him carefully, his brow furrowed with concern. He had heard the rumours, the stories of Niven's downfall, the betrayals, the corrupt deals. But seeing Niven in the flesh, hearing his words, it felt like a different reality, a man who had been swallowed whole by the system he helped build. And yet there was something unwavering in Niven's eyes. Without hesitation, Crispin moves toward the small couch in the corner, gesturing for Niven to join him. "You don't have to explain it all now, Niven. I know how hard it's been, but you're welcome to stay here. I've got room. You helped me when I had nothing. Now it's my turn." Niven hesitates, but then nods, his lips curling into a faint smile. "Thanks. I don't deserve it, but I'll take you up on that." As the night stretches on, the two old friends share stories, reminisce about the past, and the years of separation start to fade away. But in the depths of Niven's mind, something else stirs. A plan, a determination. The betrayal, the lies, the schemes that tore apart everything he had built. It was time to take it back, to expose those who had done this to him. And yet, he knows that revealing the truth could come at an immense cost. After a long pause, Niven turns to Crispin, his expression hardening. "I'm going to take them down," he declares, his voice firm, full of a quiet rage that seems to shake the room. "I'm going to expose Valencia, the fraud, the corruption that destroyed everything I had. No one else should suffer like I did. It ends now." Crispin, who had been listening intently, seems unsettled by the sudden intensity of Niven's words. He shifts uncomfortably in his seat, running a hand through his hair as he tries to find the right words. "Niven, I get it. You want justice. But do you really think it's worth digging up all of that? It's dangerous. You've been through hell already. Is it worth going through it again?" Niven's eyes flash with the remnants of the man he once was, strong, relentless, unstoppable. "I have to, Crispin. It's not just about me anymore. It's about everyone who lost because of people like Valencia. They need to be exposed. The world needs to know the truth." Crispin stares at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a cloud. His thoughts race, torn between loyalty to his friend and the realization that Niven's path is fraught with danger. He's seen how powerful people can destroy lives, how they can manipulate the system for their own gain. Yet there's something in Niven's voice, a resolve that cuts through the doubt. I just want you to be careful," Crispin says softly, his voice tinged with concern. "If you're sure about this, I'll support you, but you have to understand, there's no going back once you start digging into this. It'll change everything." Niven nods, his expression a mixture of gratitude and something darker. He knows the road ahead will be perilous, but there's no turning back now. He has to finish what was started. He won't rest until he uncovers the full extent of the corruption that ruined his life. Things are heating up now, aren't they? Will Niven succeed in his quest for justice, or will the past swallow him whole? Stick around to see what happens next, and don't forget to like and leave your comments. The city has changed. The towering glass buildings glisten under the cold evening sky, but to Niven, they are nothing more than a mask, a facade covering the corruption that runs deep in the veins of the corporate world. It was all a game, one where the rules were rigged from the start, and Valencia had been the one to pull the strings. Niven's heart races as he sets out on his mission to uncover the full extent of her deceit, determined to expose the truth that had been buried for so long. The investigation begins in the dim light of Crispin's loft. Niven pores over stacks of old documents, papers yellowed with age and filled with financial reports, contracts and handwritten notes. He traces the patterns, the signatures, the hidden messages within the lines. Some of these papers are so obscure they seem almost innocuous, but Niven's keen eye catches the discrepancies. The unsigned contracts, the unauthorized transactions, the backroom deals that never saw the light of day. This is it, the beginning of the unravelling. He spends sleepless nights digging through old records, revisiting the places he once frequented, the boardrooms where deals were made, the offices where he and Valencia had once crafted plans that seemed destined for greatness. Now those places are tainted with memories of betrayal. He meets with former allies, men and women who once trusted him, now wary of even the smallest connection to his name. Many of them have been bought or threatened into silence by Valencia's ever-growing influence. As the pieces begin to fall into place, Niven's determination only grows. He uncovers emails, shady financial transfers, and a network of shell companies designed to funnel money and launder ill-gotten gains. Each discovery only serves to reinforce the truth. Valencia had orchestrated his downfall. She had used him, betrayed him, and then destroyed him without a second thought. But Niven is no longer the man he was when he fell. He is different now, more driven, more focused. But as the investigation progresses, the shadows grow darker. Valencia's reach is long, and the deeper Niven digs, the more he feels her presence lurking behind every corner. He can almost feel her eyes watching him, the weight of her power pushing back against his every move. Soon, it becomes clear that she will stop at nothing to protect her empire, even if it means silencing anyone who dares to challenge her. One evening, as Niven steps out of an alleyway with a new lead in hand, a folder containing irrefutable evidence of fraud, a black SUV pulls up beside him. He doesn't have time to react. The door opens, and before he can make a move, two men grab him by the arms, forcing him into the back seat. They speak in low voices, their words clipped and menacing. "You've been digging where you shouldn't, Niven. You need to stop," one of them hisses, pressing a gun into his side. "You're not going to win this fight. You've already lost." Niven stays silent, his heart pounding as he looks out the window, trying to gauge their next move. His thoughts race. He knows what they want. To scare him, to break him. They think that this is over. But Niven is far from done. Just as the SUV speeds down an unfamiliar street, Niven seizes the opportunity. He kicks the door open, narrowly avoiding a blow from one of the men, and dives into the street, rolling onto the pavement. He scrambles to his feet, his body protesting from the effort, but he doesn't stop. He's already running, his pulse hammering in his ears as he races through the alleyways, his mind sharp with fear and adrenaline. The chase feels endless, as though the city itself has turned against him, the streets twisting and narrowing, the shadowy figures pursuing him, relentless and unyielding. He can hear footsteps gaining on him, but there's something else, something familiar. An echo of a distant memory that keeps him pushing forward, willing his body to move faster. And then, just as he rounds a corner out of nowhere, a sleek black car screeches to a halt in front of him. The door swings open, and Niven doesn't hesitate. He jumps in, slamming the door behind him. Celeste, the same woman who had noticed him at the restaurant, sits at the wheel, her eyes wide with urgency. "Get in now," she demands, her voice sharp and commanding. They're not far behind. Before Niven can process what's happening, the car is speeding down the street, the engine roaring as it accelerates away from the danger. He looks at Celeste, his breath ragged from the sprint, his mind struggling to catch up with what just occurred. "What are you doing here?" Niven asks, still in shock.
Why?
Celeste cuts him off with a determined shake of her head. "I've been watching. I've been listening. I know what you're doing, Niven, and I'm here to help." Niven's eyes narrow, suspicion flickering within him. "Help? Why would you help me?" Her lips tighten, her gaze fixed on the road ahead as the city's lights blur past them. "Because I know what it's like to lose everything to Valencia. I've been where you are. I know how dangerous she can be." Niven is taken aback, his mind racing as he tries to process what Celeste has just revealed. He never would have suspected her of being involved in any of this. Celeste, the polished socialite, the woman who lived in a world of power and privilege. But now, as he looks at her, there's an understanding between them, a shared sense of loss. "She did it to you too?" Niven asks quietly, his voice heavy with disbelief. Celeste nods, her jaw set, her eyes hardening. "She took everything from me. My family's business, my father's legacy. She used me, manipulated me, and then discarded me once she had what she wanted. I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy someone else." Niven feels a weight lift from his shoulders. In this woman, he sees an ally, a kindred spirit, someone who understands the stakes, the risks, and the cost of fighting back. For the first time since his fall, Niven doesn't feel so alone. "Then let's bring her down," he says, determination filling his chest. "Together." It looks like Niven's found an unlikely ally in Celeste. Could this partnership be the key to bringing down Valencia? Please like and subscribe to stay on top of this ever-changing story. The Grand Gala Hall is alive with the hum of soft conversation, the shimmer of chandeliers reflecting off polished marble floors. The guests, business moguls, politicians and socialites, are dressed in their finest, their faces glowing with wealth and privilege. At the centre of it all stands Niven, his once dishevelled appearance now transformed. The suit he wears a sharp contrast to the man who once roamed the streets. But despite the polished exterior, his heart is pounding with anticipation. This is it, the night he's been waiting for, the night he's going to expose Valencia and everything she's done. Niven's eyes scan the crowd, his gaze locking onto her. Valencia stands at the far end of the room, radiant and composed, her smile a mask of calculated charm. She's the queen of this world, the one who has played every hand, manipulated every person, and crushed every enemy in her path. But tonight, Niven will be her undoing. He feels the weight of the evidence in his briefcase, documents that will prove her guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. He's not alone in this fight. Celeste stands by his side, her expression serious, her lips pursed as she surveys the room. There's a quiet power about her now, a quiet resolve that wasn't there before. She too has suffered at Valencia's hands, but tonight she has chosen to take a stand. Niven steps forward, walking toward Valencia, his every movement deliberate, his steps slow but sure. The whispers around him fade as the crowd seems to sense the tension building in the air. He reaches her side, his presence commanding attention, and Valencia, for the first time that night, seems to falter. She turns to face him, her smile never wavering, but there's a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. "Niven," she says, her voice smooth, though there's a subtle edge to it. "I didn't expect to see you here. Have you come to beg for a second chance?" Niven's lips curl into a tight smile, but his eyes are cold. "Not at all," he replies, his voice steady, the words calculated. "I'm here to make sure everyone knows who you truly are." The room falls into a hushed silence as he pulls the documents from his briefcase and slams them down on the table between them. There's a collective intake of breath as the guests crowd around, drawn in by the tension. The evidence is undeniable. Accounting records, internal emails, fraudulent transactions, each piece a dagger aimed directly at Valencia's heart. "This," Niven continues, his voice ringing out, "is the proof of everything you've done. The illegal dealings, the money laundering, the betrayal that took me down." He pauses for a moment, his eyes locking onto Valencia's. "You were the one who destroyed me, and now the world will know exactly what you've done." For a moment, Valencia is silent, her confident facade cracking ever so slightly. Then her eyes narrow, her lips curling into a sneer. You think these papers can bring me down, Niven? You're nothing. Just a lost, homeless man trying to reclaim something you'll never have again. But Niven's expression doesn't waver. I don't need to reclaim anything, he says, his voice low and resolute. But you'll pay for what you've done. The truth is out, and there's no hiding it anymore. Just as the crowd begins to murmur, unsure of what's happening, a shocking turn of events occurs. From behind Niven, a familiar face steps forward, Leandro, the restaurant owner who had thrown Niven out weeks ago, the same man who had once humiliated him in front of a room full of strangers. Leandro's face is pale, his eyes filled with guilt. He glances at Niven, his expression shifting to one of reluctant sincerity. He's telling the truth, Leandro says, his voice shaking with remorse. I was part of it. I've been laundering money for Valencia for years. I didn't know how deep it went. I just did what she told me, but I can't live with it anymore. It's time for it all to come out. The room erupts in shock, disbelief rippling through the crowd. How could this man, a respected business owner, have been involved in such corruption? But Leandro's words are clear, and there's no denying the truth now. Valencia's grip on the room slips as her face twists into an expression of fury. She steps back, her shoulders rigid, her eyes burning with a mixture of rage and fear. You traitor, she spits, her voice thick with venom. You'll regret this. But Leandro doesn't flinch. He stands tall, his shoulders squared, his voice steady now. I already regret it, and I'll do whatever I can to make things right, starting with you. With Leandro's admission, the evidence Niven has gathered becomes irrefutable. The wheels of justice begin to turn, slowly but surely. The police are called, and within hours a full investigation into Valencia's empire begins. As the authorities take over, Valencia is taken into custody, her reign of terror finally coming to an end. In the weeks that follow, Niven's life begins to change. The legal battles are long and grueling, but with the evidence now in the open and Leandro's cooperation, Niven slowly begins to rebuild. He regains parts of his wealth and reputation, though it's never the same as before. But what truly fills the emptiness he's felt for so long isn't the money. It's the sense of justice, the knowledge that the truth has come to light and that he's made a difference. Niven decides to use his newfound fortune for good, pledging to open a foundation aimed at helping those who've fallen through the cracks, people like him, homeless, forgotten, betrayed by a system that was meant to help them. He knows it won't erase the pain of the past, but it's a start. It's a way to give back, to offer hope where there was once none. As for Leandro, he too faces the consequences of his actions. Though his guilt-ridden confession gives him a measure of redemption, he still must face the fallout from his involvement in Valencia's schemes. But Niven doesn't hold any ill will toward him. In fact, he reaches out to Leandro, offering him a chance to rebuild his life, just as others had once offered him a second chance. Niven stands before a crowd at the opening of his new foundation, the weight of everything he's been through now reflected in his eyes. There's no grand celebration, no pomp or circumstance. It's simply a new chapter, one that he hopes will bring hope to others. As he speaks, his voice carries a quiet strength, the man who once was lost now finding purpose once again. The truth has a way of coming to the surface, he says, looking out over the crowd, and no matter how far you fall, there's always a way back up. I stand here today not because I'm rich, but because I've learned that redemption is worth more than gold. The crowd claps, and for the first time in a long time, Niven smiles. A genuine smile, one that speaks of a man who has finally found peace with his past. What a journey, right? Niven's battle for redemption wasn't easy, but in the end, it's the truth that prevailed. If you loved this twist-filled story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Who knows? What's next?